Hello out there. This is a follow up episode, 15 to episode 14, where I talked about the first part of Heartache. Um, I kind of did this in two parts because heartache can come in a couple different manners. In 14, I primarily talked about heartache from being in a relationship and wanting to kind of change yourself so that you're not subject to that type of loss again. And like I said in that episode, it's not about changing who you are because even though you might want to, because you've gone through a hurtful situation and you might be slowly building this wall, um, that's not something that you want to do. Of course, we all want to try to build up some sort of foundational wall so we can kind of, you know, not always have our hearts out there to be hurt. And that's certainly natural and healthy. But when it comes to changing who you are and the things that you do and the way that you act, I think that that's still just not that's not a healthy solution. So I covered a lot of that in episode 14. In this one, and I touched a little bit on it on that episode. On this one, I want to kind of talk a little bit more about um, quickly some examples that I've gone through and going through a breakup and love loss, but also, losing someone or something else that's close to you because heartbreak certainly comes in many forms and fashions. It can be a lover, it can also be a close friend, a family member, even a pet, or even something materialistic that you're attached to. It's, a lot, it can be difficult for some people. I remember when I got rid of my first car, it was, that was my first car. I'd done a whole bunch of things in it. It was my, first gateway to freedom, and I had a hard time letting go of it, but um, nonetheless, I did. But my point being is that certainly materialistic things or something that an object that you've become attached to can certainly be um, difficult if you've lost it or you've come to a point in your life where you feel like you need to get rid of it. That can be very difficult also. So those are the type of things that I kind of want to touch on. One thing that I did want to mention in regards to breakups um, and losing someone that you loved from a breakup, specifically in a relationship. When when I was 15, I had met a girl outside of my social group that was very small, but um, I happened to be out somewhere, and I had one of my friends was a lot more outgoing than I was, and he would always strike up conversations with other people. And he ended up running into a girl that he knew, and this girl ended up having a friend of hers there. And while they were sitting there chatting, her and I just kind of started talking, and she initiated the conversation. Not that that's important, but in any case. We ended up talking, and then I think we ran into each other a couple more times, and we started dating. And she, to me, was kind of one of the first people that I really fell for. I don't know if it was because of the situation, because she was just someone completely new in my life. It was certainly interesting because it was another female who had an interest in me, and we dated for quite a while, and we broke up. And coincidentally, she was and I've mentioned this in other episodes, she was the one who I dated at 15 and she was 16. So I was in eighth grade and she was in ninth. So we were in two different schools. And of course, she was in high school and I wasn't. And so we broke up, I think, over the summer and or at the very beginning of my ninth grade year. And, she obviously had a whole bunch of friends at high school and I didn't really have any. And because I ended up going to a school that was in my new school district, so I didn't really have any friends. And she set out to, kind of embarrass me and make fun of me and laugh at me with her friends whenever I would pass them in the hallways, and I didn't really understand why. And it was frustrating, and it made me so angry because I had never done anything to her, certainly never anything bad, and it was just hard for me to understand because she was somebody that I had a deep connection with, at least I felt like I did, and, I thought it was reciprocated, but it wasn't, and then to go to a new school and then have all these new people and older people picking on you for whatever reason because of something she said, and, there were I, of course, wanted to do I had terrible thoughts about things that I wanted to do to her or her car and her parents' house and things like that. Anger and frustration, kind of like we all do. But what was interesting is, I in that time period, I just found different ways to get to my classes so I didn't have to pass her in school and deal with ridicule and things like that. And I ended up running into her in my mid 20s. And oddly enough, she apologized for the way that she had treated me back then. And she was certainly a different person in her mid 20s now than she was when she was 16 and 17. So oddly enough, we ended up dating again. And that was probably not my best choice for reasons I won't get into. But the kind of the point in the conversation in this particular example was, there was you never know who you're going to meet and who you're going to run back into and where they're going to be in their lives and where you're going to be in your lives. So, if there is someone that you are very close to that recently broke up with you and you really don't know why, and you've got these deep, dark, negative, and anger feelings, just know that it is certainly possible that you could run into this person again later in your life and it'd be a completely different experience than what you're experiencing now or what you've experienced recently. And that kind of also ties back into something that I mentioned in another episode in regards to, you know, you being aware of how you treat other people. And of course, I know that the whole purpose of me creating this audio vlog was so that we could talk about and discuss being a victim. And of course, who wants to think about how you're treating other people when you're a victim and you're the one who's being treated negatively? But um, it's always important because if you think about how life can come back at you in unexpected times, and you don't really know why or how or that it would even happen. Just being aware that it certainly can, because it's so bizarre on how things can come around in your life. Um, in any case, so if you have gone through a recent breakup, um, or it was a close friend that for whatever reason didn't want to become your friend, it's just a certain phase that they might be going through in their lives that unfortunately have directly affected you and your emotions and made you second guess yourself and who you are and what you do. It's just still very important to realize and remember to stay true to who you are, because later on in life you might run into those people again or that person again, and it'd be a completely different experience. So that's all I'll kind of spend on time as far as a breakup. Friends certainly kind of tie into that situation. Family members and pets and things that you're tied to material wise uh, can be very difficult to understand and loss. For some people, losing just we might think as being the simplest thing can be very devastating. Um, and my point in saying that is everybody who's going through something is dealing with it in their own ways, and their level of importance is different than what we might think it is if they happen to be telling us a certain story. It might not seem like a big deal to you if someone is talking to you about something that they've recently lost, but we don't really know how they came to this object that they lost, or this person that they lost, and what they've gone through with this particular person, place, or thing. It's everything is important to the person who's experiencing it. And I think that that's important to realize. So as if you're going through a loss or you've recently gone through a loss, it's hard. I've like I said in other episodes, I've lost many close friends of mine, and what I think is interesting is one of my very best friend at the time, and I've mentioned I brought him up in previous episodes. Um, he took his own life, and I had a really hard time with that. Not only because he we almost met almost every day, if not every day, multiple times during the week, and even if it was for just a short break to go to Starbucks or somewhere to get coffee, that was kind of our thing. And there was at least one or two times that I can think of where he did mention how he was depressed, and I won't go through the details as to why, but he was depressed and he had contemplated suicide. And I said, you don't realize how many people that's going to affect. Not only that, and what that's going to do to me. Um, and he he knew that we were close because we spent so much time together. I mean, we did just tons and tons of stuff together. And but I think he was kind of shocked when I told him how affected I would be. Unfortunately, it didn't obviously make that much of an impact when he did take his life. But you have to realize you don't really know what people are going through. I certainly don't know what you're going through, but I certainly hope that through this or through some other medium that you can be strong to continue to be who you are and to try to look on the bright side of life and to I know that sounds so corny and I use that primarily as a reference to the bright side of life song from Monty Python, but nonetheless it's still very important, I think. So going back to the story, um him and I had gone to a Starbucks just a few days before uh, he had he had passed away. And up until a few years ago, now this was in 2007. So up until a few years ago, I actually still had that last cup of coffee that him and I had together. Of course, I emptied the cup, but I still had the cup, and it was a paper cup. And my friends just thought I was crazy for keeping this thing, but there was something about it, and it was able to bring back. Not that I didn't have memories, but it was something that kind of forced me to have certain memories and to rethink certain memories that I might not have had. So, my point in saying this is if you have recently lost someone or something or a thing, or a person or a pet, try to think about the things that you did that you enjoyed and that were fun. And even go back to, not in a creepy way, because I don't mean it like this, but if there was a certain song that you both listened to, and I'm not talking about, just dwelling on things that you used to do and that make you sadder. No, I'm thinking about, we're focusing on loss of a close friend or, again, a pet or an animal or a family member and things like this. I think it's good to keep yourself close to those memories that you had because they can help you come out of a dark place. If you start thinking negatively about what you've gone through and what you're experiencing and, how terrible it is to have gone through this particular type of loss, just remember all the things that you did together. Um, again, if it was a song or a movie or a TV show or a place that you went or drank that this other person always drank or what have you. I think those things are important because it kind of helps ground you and make you remember all the good things, not the loss that you're experiencing. And while certainly it might bring back open those memories of, I wish this person or this thing wasn't gone anymore because of all these great memories, such as this, and this that I had. But at least you were able to experience those memories and those experiences in general. If you haven't listened to all of my episodes, it was complete out of the norm that I ended up meeting this particular individual that became my best friend. And I just didn't realize how big of a part he was going to be in my life and I was going to be in his. And we just, we became really great friends. And you never really know what tomorrow is going to bring. And that can certainly go in many different ways. But the point in that is just hanging on to something. If you've recently lost a parent or a grandparent or again a close one, think of all the good times you had. And I know that sounds terribly corny, but if there was something that you did that might just awaken other memories that you didn't realize you had, kind of like the cup did for me. Um, this particular person always drank Heineken, and whenever I go out and have a drink, which I don't do often, but when I do, or if I do, I typically will have a Heineken, and that'll kind of bring back all the memories that we had. Not that we drank a lot, but the point is that again, it's kind of another object, and I even still have up until a few years ago, probably 2 years ago, I actually still had the newspapers that had his obituary in it. And I'm a nostalgic person, but I think for me at least, at some point in time you have to realize what's a good keepsake and what's not. The coffee cup for me was because, it brought back great memories. Having the newspapers wasn't because it reminded me of, his death. And, but oddly enough, the coffee cup didn't. And so, if there's certain things that you do keep because they remind you, try to think of is this object in a healthy way keeping their memory alive with you? The other thing that you might experience and go through if you've lost someone, specifically if you've ever lost anyone through suicide or, um, well, we'll stick with that specifically for now, through suicide, in no way, shape, or form should you ever blame yourself. And I bring this up obviously because it's something that I've gone through. And while I don't know, I didn't directly blame myself because of the other things that were there in his life that kind of brought him to that. It was still hard for me to kind of let that go because he had mentioned that he contemplated taking his life. And I think back, is there something I could have done? Is there something I could have said? And there may have been, and there might not have been. But in many cases, it would make me depressed. It would bring me in a dark place because I would take the blame for this loss. And obviously, over time, I realized that it wasn't me. There wasn't anything that I could do, but it was still hard. And so, I hope that if you are going through a similar situation like that, don't ever blame yourself because you never know what that person is going through. And you don't really know if there's anything that you could have said or done. Typically, somebody who is suicidal to that extent has come to certain terms in their own ways, and there's nothing that you could do. So hopefully, that's not something that you're ever beating yourself up over because that's just going to continue to drag yourself down and make you more depressed, possibly, or angry. And it could even turn into resentment and anger towards the person that you're sad that you missed. So I hope that that doesn't ever happen. When it comes to loss of even a family member or a close person, another thing that you could do to try to maybe help not make you so depressed, of course, is think of the good times that you went through. Think of specific memories that only you have. Um, the other thing that you could do, and I know a lot of people have said this, and I thought it was corny, but it oddly enough worked for me. And I even mentioned this in another episode when I was talking about when I lost my childhood dog. Writing a letter. Nowadays, you could probably, write a text or an email or something more specific, or even put a post on Facebook or Instagram or whatever your social media platform might be. But I think it's very important to get feelings out. Holding feelings in aren't really going to do you any good because having emotions is very important as a human, and being able to understand those emotions and what to do with them is also very important. But emotions are something that's meant to get out. That's why we have emotions. That's why people cry, and a lot of times it's not something that you can control. That's just the way of your body expressing its emotions externally, and it's very important that you continue to do that. If crying helps, that's great. If writing a letter or an email or something like that, jotting it down can really help bring up memories and feelings that you might not have had. And that's important because as you start to write this letter, you'll start to reflect, and then you'll start to think of specific moments, and that'll take you to other specific moments that might make you happy, might make you sad, but it's going to make you emotional. And that's going to help bring out what you have inside that could, in some cases, later on turn to depression. It could also later on turn to anger and frustration. And that's not obviously where we want to be. We want to try to understand what we're going through and be able to handle our emotions and love what we've been through and express what we've been through. And so talking can also be another form if you're comfortable talking to someone else about it. Not in a professional manner like a psychologist unless you feel that's good for you. But I think at least talking and expressing it again by writing it and just letting your emotions come out because that's very important. It's interesting emotions because they're com- they're compounded. Yesterday you could have had a terrible day, a bad day that you were just very angry, and that today maybe the smallest thing that wouldn't have normally affected you, you lashed out on, or it made you even more angry. And part of that is because of the anger that you had yesterday. And depression works a lot like that. If you're sad today about a particular event, or maybe you saw, I don't know, a mother slap their young infant for no reason at all, you might have had a feeling of depression and sadness yesterday, or possibly even anger. And then today saw something else or read something on the news, or somebody said something terrible towards you. Well, the emotions that you had yesterday and the emotions that you have today can really become compounded. And I'm using this in a simplistic manner because obviously what happens yesterday and what happens to today aren't going to directly affect you unless they're very similar. My point is that day after day, whether you realize it or not, we're all going through emotions and we all witness things, we all see things, even at work or at school. Obviously, if you're somebody who's been picked on a lot and are picked on a daily basis or a weekly basis or a monthly basis, you still have all those emotions. And then you've got something else going on at home or with another friend, it just becomes compounded. So I think emotions, and that's why in my earlier episode, emotions are emotions and finding a feeling, because it's very important to be able to find your emotions and understand them, and at least understand them to a certain degree. So if you experience a loss, you can be healthy in expressing your feelings and emotions and understanding what you're going through so that it doesn't affect another part of your life or make you more depressed. So, yeah, it's loss is I could probably do 10 different episodes on heartache and loss. And um like I said, I certainly would am very well open to suggestions on things you want me to talk about or go back to. You can always email me at lifeliveseries@gmail.com, or write in the comments or send a discussion link to me or something like that, because I could go on and on forever. And I wanted to try to stay around 15 to 20 minutes. I'm already at 23. Um, but I hope that this was helpful. The biggest takeaway is if you've experienced a loss, think of the amazing moments that you had together with this person or this object that was lost, um, or letting go. I'll probably even do an episode of learning to let go because that's something that I've experienced. And throwing away the newspapers was so hard for me. I couldn't even express the feelings. It was very difficult for me to throw that away and the coffee cup away. Um, but I had to because those were emotions that I hadn't fully let go of yet, and I needed to, especially holding on to them for well, since 2007, so almost 10 years. Um, but anyway, I hope it's helpful. There's no single answer that I can give you for loss other than just thinking about the times you went to, and don't think about becoming the person that you lost, because they liked you for you, and they wouldn't want you to change. They would want you to be happy and continue to grow as a human and as an adult. And I hope that that you do continue to do that, and in some way I can help you. So I'm sorry that you've gone through a loss recently or ever in your life. Unfortunately, it's inevitable. Um, but I think being prepared for when loss does come, it makes it a little bit easier. And not only that, you'll be able to experience the loss more real or truly, or I don't know the right word. Um, because when I lost my friend, I had anger for so long, and I wish I hadn't. I wish that I had embraced the friendship that we had together and reflected on the happy times that we had together. But I was just so angry and depressed for so long that I couldn't. And I don't want that for you. I want you to be able to, for this to be not an easy experience because obviously loss is not, but um, I would want it to be more successful than what I went through. So thank you for listening. Please, like I said, if there's anything you'd like for me to discuss or talk about or bring up, I will, and it will certainly be anonymous. I would never say your name or even that this came from anywhere, but nonetheless, I hope this was helpful. Thank you for listening. Bye.